Bucky O'Hare was created by Michael Golden and Larry Hama, the latter being of G.I. Joe comics fame in, from what I've read, 1978 or 1979, and it was later turned into a comic, just this one run of it in the mid to late 1980s. It then spawned a toy line and a television show, the toy line being created by Hasbro. Once you see the figures, probably quite obviously in response to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The timeline of it kind of confuses me a little bit because the comic was created in, the mid 80s and toy lines didn't come out until early 90s. But when you look in the comic, elements of the toy design are already apparent, like these tabs on Bucky's belt and Deadeye Duck's back here are to hold their weapon, which is directly related on the toys themselves. There's panels like this where Bucky has a pig hole in the bottom of his chute. But yeah, it makes me wonder how long this was in development and production, and if these character models that were drawn in the comics were referenced from the toys, or how exactly that all lines up. It would be interesting to be able to learn more, but I just haven't been able to, I just don't know where to look to find that out. But I do have all of the figures. 6 of the good guys, Bucky himself, Android First Class Blinky, Willie DeWitt, Commander Dogstar, Deadeye Duck, Bruiser, the Berserker Baboon. This character is in the comics very briefly. He's part of the crew of their ship, the Righteous Indignation, and he's actually vaporized in the very beginning. There are 4 of the bad and the ugly Toads, which are the Toad Air Marshal, Toadborg, Toad Stormtrooper, and Alligator. They all have clippable file cards. There's Bucky's, and a couple of panels from the comic on the back that they've rewritten to kind of set the stage. But here's Bucky O'Hare himself in his package. This one has a bright orange laser pistol, or I believe they're in the Bucky O'Hare universe they're called Mazers, but I actually had this figure when he was new, because I got him because I liked his pistol, and it was silver then. So there seems to be kind of 2 runs of all of the figures where they have either really colorful guns or just silver ones. I much prefer the silver one. I've been trying to find a loose Bucky with a decent silver gun to replace this one once I open him. They use this really splashy comic book art on the front. I think the cards are really quite attractive with the big bubbly logo and the bright colors. He's a captain in space, which stands for Sentient Protoplasm Against Colonial Encroachment, which is kind of typical of the humor you see in the Bucky O'Hare comic, and it's in line with like what Ninja Turtles turned into, I think. So perfect for the time to try to step into that market, although Bucky O'Hare didn't really put a dent in it from what I understand. So there's Bucky O'Hare with his laser pistol. Seems like he's suffered kind of a bit in his packaging, where he's kind of a little bit of scuffing on him, and the plastic seems to be discoloring slightly. His feet are kind of bizarre. He's, they're in this permanent crouch, so he can stand flat-footed quite well, or you can kind of work him into a more action position, but because of his giant feet, that allows him to stand even at something you wouldn't normally think he would. He has kind of a hollow rubber head. His ears move. The articulation is very limited. His arms don't move up or down because of his humongous epaulets. They only swivel, so he can't really raise his gun to shoot. It's just side to side. He does have this kind of extra like spacesuit type thing going on here that he doesn't have in the comic, and I don't recall in the cartoon. I'm not as familiar with the cartoon, but I think they added that. And they do have this kind of weird feature where you can tab their guns onto their belts, but due to his arm not being able to swivel away, it's probably next to impossible to get it in that one. He has kind of a soft rubber cape with some printing on it. Really quite a good likeness for the comic, I think. And I think it's a good sculpt. In execution, the paint is kind of not great, and there's a lot of soft detail. When you see him next to Michelangelo here, you can really tell they were going after that same look and feel. The kind of Playmates crouch has been repeated in the Bucky O'Hare figures, and the Turtles themselves are one of my favorite toys, and I'm going to do another video on them later. But you can definitely tell that this was what was going on here. So the gunner of Bucky O'Hare's ship is this guy, Deadeye Duck, who I just was not able to find, when I was collecting these guys, a Deadeye Duck on the card that was reasonably priced. He seemed to be a great deal higher than most of the other characters, except for maybe the Toad Stormtrooper, who I assume people get to army build if there are any hardcore Bucky O'Hare collectors. I don't know. But some have popped up since for better prices, but I just didn't have it in time for this video, so you'll have to give me a pass on him. But I did grab a loose one that's in pretty great shape. He has kind of the same thing going on with the 1 foot in an action pose and the 1 foot flat. He poses much better with his 1 foot kind of raised, like he's taking a step. The same with Bucky O'Hare. Although his arms do move up and down, he has no other swivels at all. He has no wrist or elbow, so he's pretty limited. There's these pegs, but there's no way you're going to be able to get all 4 of his guns on those at once, and they're just too large to look good. He also has a big hole in his back, which I don't believe he came with any other accessory that would have went there, and you can't really put his guns back there, so maybe that was for something later that was never produced. He's a pretty good figure. I like his colors, and it's again just the super soft detail on these, I think, is what hold them back. And here we have AFC Blinky, which stands for Android First Class, who's kind of the perpetually worried and freaking out science officer kind of on Bucky's ship, and his artwork does prominently display him freaking out. Kind of something you don't see a whole lot, but these characters have a flat backing to keep them from rubbing against the card. And given the kind of soft plastic that they used for these guys and the paint, they probably did that for quality control, because they would have rubbed right off. The Blinky comes with a very large accessory backpack here. It's kind of a jetpack with probably some sort of cannon or something off to the side. The printing on the big eyeball is super sharp and clean and looks really nice. It's too bad they couldn't use some kind of gloss on the whole thing like they did in the middle to make it really pop. Or even if it was like a ball articulated like Optic from New Adventures of He-Man. What's really impressive is, I was not expecting, is that his arms are bendums. I believe there's a wire in there. So far he's one of the most posable figures. It's pretty cool. They, independently swivel, and they'll bend and kind of hold their position. It has a limit, but pretty good. His legs are solid molded though, and they don't bend, but due to the weight of his backpack, he's really kind of gotta find the sweet spot to get him to stand with it. But unfortunately that means he's got to lean pretty far forward. I do really like the design of the weapons in Bucky O'Hare. I think they're really fun, kind of retro laser pistols. He's very monotone, but I think it works. I just wish they had done a little bit more with that. And here's Willie DeWitt, who's the human kind of science genius kid and from Earth who crossed over to an alternate reality. The comic has kind of a lot of commentary because his parents are hippies and he kind of doesn't want anything to do with them. It's got kind of a message that's a little odd, but it is what it is. So here's Willie DeWitt. He's quite a bit heavier than the other characters. He's very solid, rubbery head again, but he does have, it's a nice touch with his see-through glasses. I think that's pretty cool. Not something you see a whole lot. The suit that he's wearing actually belonged to the Baboon crew member in the comic. It was shot and killed very early on, and they just gave his spacesuit to Willie after he crosses over. Because he's kind of bigger than most of the characters in the comic, because he's human and the animals are very small. He also comes with this headpiece to his spacesuit that just kind of sits there. It doesn't really lock into place, but I don't very much care for it. I will definitely display it with him off because he doesn't really wear it a whole lot. His pistol looks exactly like it does in the comic. It's even got a kind of water pistol trigger, because in the comic it is a water pistol. He actually destroys a Toad tank with it because it's not waterproofed. But here he is with full accessories. He doesn't have, well, he does have wrist articulation, so you can turn his wrists, but he's just elbows, or he's just shoulders, no elbows. And kind of a one-way rotating joint on his hip. With these humongous feet, he of course stands extremely well. Next we have Commander Dogstar. Now he's not in the original comic, so I don't really know a whole lot about him. They've drawn him here with these kind of elaborate boots with pegs on it, which doesn't look like it's translated to the actual figure. So Commander Dogstar seems to only have one way that he's going to stand, because he's got an extremely tilted foot in the back, as you can see. So once you find the sweet spot, he stands okay. He's got some very glossy hands, which is a weird choice, considering Willie DeWitt they did so well with kind of mixing the matte and glossy paints. I like his head sculpt though. It's very reminds me of the California Raisins, that kind of style. He's got a peg on his back, which I'm not sure what that's for. Doesn't really sync up when Deadeye has a hole, so who knows what they were planning. And he comes with 2 identical laser pistols, so he looks pretty cool with his guns ready to go. This guy is what really made me wonder how much of Star Fox was inspired, or is a lot like General Pepper from Star Fox. I know Star Fox is supposedly mostly modeled off of Thunderbirds, so it could be just coincidence, but even in the comic, or even in the cartoon, the Complex, the Toad AI that's kind of the evil big bad guy, looks a lot like Andross. And the very last of the heroes is Bruiser, the Berserker Baboon. The Berserker Baboons are mentioned quite a bit in the comic, although the only one that you see is killed at the very beginning. That's where Willie gets his spacesuit, like I was talking about. Yeah, that's right. In the comic, they're actually Beetlejuicean Berserker Baboons. But this says he's a space marine, while in the comic, the character was more of an engineer. But he's much bigger than the other guy, so it's just cool to see variance in scale, you know? So because of the way his feet are positioned, like you really, and those extremely angled hips that all the guys have, he really has to lean forward and use his other hand for support. Well, he's got this kind of space assault rifle, which is a great, like whoever did the weapons for these, I think did a really great job. So he's got his rifle and well, I think he looks great standing there. I don't know what the playability on something like this would really be, because it seems like a lot of these characters were molded to stand a certain way and not so much to be played with, because I can't imagine this guy fitting well in any kind of vehicles that they would have made. Now on his back he has a hole and 2 small pegs, so who knows what's going on back there. But once again, the peg holster mechanic, while it works, it's not terribly functional. Alright, so there's all 6 of the heroes from Bucky O'Hare together. I do think that these 3, Bucky, the android, and Deadeye, look the best together. Like their colors seem to work the best together. These guys are a little more brown and understated. I think my favorites are probably these 3 in the front. I mean, they all have something cool about them. It's hard to pick. They're all pretty interesting. Like I think they drew a lot from the talent of that was put into the comic, and it really shines through into these. You know, I think it's kind of an underrated toy line. I think because of having to go up against Ninja Turtles. I mean, of course, it was going to get crushed, but I do think they're pretty neat. I do have one of the vehicles to look at. The Toad Double Bubble I do not have, which sucks because it's a really cool looking vehicle. I love the design of it. But loose, it's almost impossible to find it complete, and sealed in box, it costs a fortune, so that one I may never get my hands on. I think these guys are really cool. I also have on order the Boss Fight Studios did a modern take of Bucky O'Hare and a couple of the other crew they've done. And once I get through the original toy line, we'll look at those. Yeah, thanks very much for watching, and we'll continue on with this kind of strange toy line that I think is worth looking at. See you next time.